Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Charit. Am I audible?
Sure, Sunil. I can hear loud and clear.
And also from Sri Lanka. And today's session is a very, very contemporary topic. Before I get on to the introduction of the speaker, some housekeeping rules, and all the questions will be parked for end of the sessions where you have a 15-minute Q&A. With that said, let me get started with the introduction. Indunil, our speaker today, is a senior general manager with the group risk and control of Brandix group of companies. Indunil has got an industry and a consulting experience with PricewaterhouseCoopers and with the Brandix group, with over 15 years of managerial experience in governance, risk and controls. Indunil also holds half a dozen professional qualifications and degrees, be it FCA in Sri Lanka, FCCA UK, CRMA, the Certified Risk Management Assurance, Certified Internal Auditor US, MBA, and is currently pursuing PhD on Governance, Risk and Management. Indunil has been contributing to the internal audit professions, the audit profession, and the assurance over the past 19 years with continuous lecturing, and is also lecturer of a very prestigious university in Sri Lanka as part of the Department of Accounting. Indunil has also authored books, curriculum developer, and also national public conference speaker. With that said, I thank everybody and looking for an insightful session. I would also want to thank Charit, President, Vizag Audit Club, and our colleague who is there here. Charit, over to you, please.
Thank you, Sunil. Am I audible, Sunil?
You are, Charit. Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Sunil, and greatly thank you for the opportunity provided by the Hyderabad chapter, and also thank you for everyone in the Vizag Audit Club for making today possible. And speaking about Indunil, I have not just worked with Indunil, but Indunil has mentored me. So I've had that history. I know the caliber of Indunil, and I'm actually genuinely excited for today's session. Given Indunil's workload also has been quite difficult to work out, but nevertheless, I think from both sides there has been genuine intent for the purpose of sharing knowledge. I think Sunil also can vet to the fact that the entire purpose of the session is just to share knowledge, which is a genuine intent from all sides. So which is the lovely thing, I believe. And looking at the number of people who have registered, I think this contemporary topic is of importance. And I think seemingly going forward, we depend more and more on the risk and audit field professionals in any company because of the landscape of our current corporate cultures and how the landscape of our economies and everything has transpired. So keeping things short and finally being able to sit back, listen to it, and take everything in. I think now shall hand it over to Indunil to commence the session. And thank you once again, Indunil, for this for dedicating this time. Over to you, Indunil.
So thank you very much, Sunil and Charit, for the introductory remarks. And it's a great pleasure to share my knowledge. Of course, I've been regularly working with IIA Sri Lanka, conducting several sessions, and this time, especially with request you made, I thought of sharing this knowledge, and I'm sure there are a lot of participants from Sri Lanka colleagues also have joined this session. So I'm sure at the end you are definitely able to learn, and please feel free to utilize that 15 minutes to reflect upon key learnings from this session. So without further ado, let me share my screen, and then we can start. Sunil, Charit, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, Indunil. Request you to put it up in. Yes, it's now come on a full slide mode.
Yeah. So as you can see, the title, you already know the session agenda. So its title as Breaking Silos. How do you create an integrated governance architecture for your organization? Like we talk about architect internal audit, I mean, this session is not purely for internal audit professionals, even for finance professionals. I would say governance professionals, there are a lot to learn. So this is how I have planned the session, and I am kind of warning you to make sure that because I am extensively involved not only in practicing as an academic, sharing knowledge, learning is my passion, and there are a lot that I will cover during next 1 hour and maybe 5 minutes. So therefore, I would like you to, if you see anything new, please make a note. And this, rather than deep diving into these areas, I would like to broaden your horizon. That's the idea. So otherwise, each of these boxes that you can see, these are the 5 segments of the session, and I could probably do more than 2 hours on one topic, but I have limited it. The whole idea being to keep that integrated perspective, overall coverage as strategic position, that governance professional, in that sense, it may be an internal audit, compliance, or a CFO, or a risk manager, right? How do you work with board of directors to provide not only assurance, but advisory role, advisory services, as well as insight. So in that sense, I mean, these pictures also make sense. How do you break silos, and how do you connect disintegrated pieces, right, to put together a very strong governance framework? So the first part of the session, I will talk with in terms of, okay, corporate governance, everybody knows about it, but how do you describe organizational governance? Then we will get into the bigger picture of a business. Where do you start building an integrated governance framework? And then, I mean, all of us know that auditing processes, the internal controls, etc. But I would like to talk about auditing governance processes and culture. And then this really combined assurance has become much popular topic last, I would say, last 5 years. And now companies are increasingly thinking to adopt. Perhaps some may not know what combined assurance is, but you practice, right? And then I would like to finally connect not a very detailed case study, but to show whatever I talk, how they can be practically implemented. So that's the kind of agenda. And then let us start with, I mean, largely the audience is internal audit, I'm sure. But although you are a finance professional or any other professional, whatever we talk connects to governance. So I would like to start with the strategic mission of internal audit. As you see, the strategic mission is to protect the organization, but it's not just to protect, right? How enhance the value, how to create value, how to protect value through risk-based objective assurance, advice, and insight. So there are now, this is the mission, and one would wonder how audit professionals can create money. Are they going to involve in making money? They are not a part of making money, they are just a cost center, right? But you will realize how you can probably convince the governing body of a company the immense value internal audit professionals can create through various governance processes, right? Giving assurance to board on intangible elements like culture. So those are the topics for the day. So accordingly, all of you know that there is a very comprehensive framework that internal auditor should be guided. On the top, you see the mission, which I covered, how to create and protect value. And that mission has to be supported. So there are 10 core principles, of which I have put 3 things that really matters from board perspective. Anything that internal audit is working, how it connects to strategies of the organization, objectives, and risks. So that's one of the core principles, how to improve the organizational performance, and then the work to be insightful, proactive, and future focused. So this whole session probably revolves around, I mean, the aspect that I cover connects to this principle as well. So the question, right, the mission talks about value. So end of the day, when it comes to any business, the idea is business has to be profitable, it has to make money. Anybody working for a business, they have to have some role in creating value, otherwise that role may be redundant. So When it comes to internal audit, I don't go to a lot of technicality, but very powerful definition is behind professional practice framework. How do they explain internal audit, right? Three pieces the internal auditor should cover. So I draw your attention there. One is, it is a systematic and disciplined approach that is followed to evaluate risk management, control, and governance process. Now, these words that I spoke about, we need to operationalize in a business. What are the governance processes we need to look at beyond typical control, and how risk management need to be considered in auditing? So that is why I drew attention to this, setting the context for the session, and then let us start with integration. How do you integrate? How to build a world-class ERC function through this integration process? What do you mean by integration? Right now, in an organization, there can be different people doing different types of assurance work, right? Various forms they are giving input to the board of directors, the CEOs. Right now, internal audit is in a unique position. Even finance professionals, they are in a unique position to look at the bigger picture by connecting the. So, before telling the story of connecting, I would like to start with the big picture, governance and kind of modern redefinition. So, why I say this is a redefinition, of course, you will realize the story of father and the grandfather. If you now Google father of corporate governance, I am sure on the top you will see prominent or profound writer, Otricker, about corporate governance, many versions, how popular it is around the world. On Otricker's book, one might say that he is a father of corporate governance. Even if you search it, that's what Otricker says. As the author of, now this is what he says, as the author of UK Corporate Governance Code. Now, you know the UK, the term corporate governance was first introduced in UK Corporate Governance Code in 92, right, by Sir Adrian Cadbury's report. In the report, right, so therefore, Botricker says he is the father, right? But then Sir Adrian Cadbury says, I regard Botricker as the father because the book he wrote in 84 introduced words of corporate governance. Now, why I mention this to you, you can see the profile of both these, I mean, kind of founder thinkers in governance, because I want to talk about future of corporate governance from their perspective and also from our perspective. Now, in one of the writings, you can see, I mean, I already mentioned what they say about governance in one of the articles or one of the publications. Cadbury says, you know what is future of corporate governance? Of course, I will come to that. I missed, sorry, that slide. I will straight away move there. Now, see, why I mentioned this father and grandfather story to ask what was yesterday corporate governance and what is today's governance and what is tomorrow governance. The analysis of these two people that I mentioned to you. They say that yesterday or historically we are talking about board balance and X number of directors, independent directors, etc. Those are typical standards of governance, right? But when it comes to today's governance, the idea is whether business, right? What is the role? What is the value they are creating to the society? Or are they destroying the society, right? But future corporate governance, what? The future corporate governance, according to Sir Adrian Cadbury, right? They have given a lot of regards to King Code in South Africa, which has brought or introduced governance in a very different way with a different definition. So I'm coming to that definition, but before that, I want to ensure that to recap fundamentals before we get into a lot of practical details of the case study, right? Now, I have put several companies around the world including our countries in this. I mean, you can see how popular these cases, and we can ask the fundamental question that every day we see regulatory changes, the corporate governance codes, the companies, these changes are happening. But these scandals, the corporate failures continue, right? Some issue has not been really addressed, right? Of course, we will never prevent these things. And beyond corporate scandals, you can see the social calamities starting from taking big cases in the history like British Petroleum to very recent cases represent apparel industry. Now, for example, this some of the cases like human rights. Uh, I, I have a picture to see these things with US restrictions imposed based on the human rights. So these are really changing the way we do business, right? So these have become big topics in business. So governance has to play such a big role beyond making money to look at social and environmental impact. So I want to go back to fundamentals before we get into details. So that's one of the fundamental is, and also this last question to ask in all of these failures, we should ask the question, where was the board? Why they failed? So what is the role of the board? The board has to play a key role in governance. Why board failed? So we will analyze that in detail. So this is one of the very powerful message. And usually I have asked this from many people, and you can ask from yourself or your colleagues. Can you simply tell me what's the difference between governance and management? Many people fail to understand. Governance is not management, right? So governance is about what happens at boardroom. They exercise power, right? So in a very powerful explanation by Tricker, he says that four key things board of directors are usually playing with, or they are supposed to work strategy formulation process. Strategy. So what is our role behind strategy, right? Policy framework, right? So, when it comes to finance auditing, the policy play a key role. What's the role of the board? So strategy, policy, and board role in supervising management. So management will run the business to make money, but the policy framework, strategic direction, supervision, and to be accountable to stakeholders. So these are the big role of the government. When it comes to management, they run the business, but governance has to ensure they run the business, right, in the manner that is in the interest of all stakeholders, not just shareholders. So that is why the articulation through a triangle, that triangle being the management, which is superimposed by the circle, that is governance, the governing body, depending on the country, the number of outside directors, all of that. But the big message here is that the board is playing these roles to really govern. So when it comes to governance, there are two bigger perspectives. One is governance, the conformance side, right? Conformance means you follow the laws and regulations and the rules. But end of the day, no point of following rules if company is not making money. So that other side of the coin is the performance. So the conformance performance debate have been there forever. So don't think this session is an academic session. So this foundational. And now I'm getting to a lot of practical details, because without this holistic picture, I mean, it's not worth of discussing bigger topics. So I already covered this. Now, what is really the thinking driven by with Professor Mervyn King's thought on King Code? What they say is we always talk about tone at the top. How can we only talk about the tone at the top? Do you think only top people can do well in governing? No, there is a bigger role across the organization. So in introducing King Code, he described this, not only tone at the top, we need to see tune in the middle and beat of the feet at the bottom. So if you look at the organization, you can probably say that everybody is a risk manager. Everyone has a role to play in managing risk. So we need to look at the bottom of the pyramid, that beat of the feet at the bottom, the middle, and the top. When you look at everybody and create your governance structure, it becomes very integrated. So in this King Code, they specifically say, and even if you research of trends around the world, these are three bigger trends that you can probably describe in the corporate world. Now we are looking beyond financial capital to talk about inclusive capital, the 6 types of capital in the most famous framework integrated report, in which I might briefly touch upon. And we are talking from short-term capital market to sustainable market, and then already said silo-based reporting to integrated reporting. Why? Because our traditional numbers, if you look at the study, says they can describe probably about out of the total value of the asset, maybe a bigger part is not covered, right? So 80% may be intangible, that is not reflected in the historical numbers, right? So what is internal audit role in this process? So I will cover those aspects. Now, when I say redefinition of governance, look at this definition. Now, I said, if you look at Adrian Cadbury's the famous UK quote, simply say governance is a system by which companies are directed and controlled. But this definition, I don't want you to just buy this definition, but look at practically what, analyze any corporate failure and see what is going wrong. Now, this outcome-based approach to governance simply describe governance as outcome. If you achieve these outcomes, you are going to be better. What are those outcomes? If there is no ethical culture, you can't make money at any cost, right? I have a couple of cases. I'm sure you know what is happening on a day-to-day basis around the world. There are ethical culture. So how do you know whether there is ethical culture? How do we give assurance that the culture is conducive for the business to perform? And the strategy, culture, marriage, they connect each other well. So governance is defined as ethical and effective leadership. So ethical and effective leadership to achieve 4 things. Ethical culture, of course, performance matters. Like I said, traditional thinking, conformance and performance. Performance, make money, and then control. You have to make money within a framework, and legitimacy about company's role towards the environment, to everybody. Now see, this is a much bigger perspective. Through governance are we achieving these outcomes. So there are about 16 principles and many recommendations in code covering these areas. So internal audit professional also, this concept of combined assurance was first introduced in code, and that has become much popular, and many organizations are now thinking to adopt. So, so I just wanted to start my session giving you a different perspective to governance, because if you really don't work about, don't address these areas like ethics, culture, which are intangible in organization, no point of just taking controls. And you can go to any corporate failures and see the control audit committee has been there. What inside the iceberg? That is very important. And then now coming to integrated governance, right? Now this is another perspective. If you really see where the governance has to come, look at any business. They have to make money through business planning, execution, monitoring, and adopting. So in this whole process, you can't just do the business. The board of directors, the executive directors, non-executives, they will set the strategic tone with the CEO, and this whole process has to be governed. So governance has a bigger role. In that sense, as a part of strategy, resource allocation, right, accountability, assurance. So the governance has to be connected to every aspect of the business. How do we practically do that? I'm going to discuss in this case study. So in a little while, we are getting to practicals of most of these topics. So this is from a study by COSO, and I want to connect this to governance definition in IIA. So it's very important that you carefully note this definition. Of course, people talk about governance, but what is really governance? From a business insider perspective, right? I'm not asking what is corporate governance, but this definition says what is governance. And very interestingly, it is about processes and structures, right, implemented by the board. Now there we need to see, otherwise this word can be controlled. When it comes to governance, these processes and structures which are implemented by the board to inform, direct, manage, monitor what company achieve company objectives. So what are such governance processes? Some of these governance processes are not robust. Company, whatever controls you can have, companies or question in terms of managing risk. So I will discuss those in the coming slides. So now to recap what we discussed so far, I took the coming to second segment of the presentation, which is going to be more, after this, it's going to be more practical, especially the end part. I explain a lot of, some time to give you practical perspective. Now, after giving an explanation about outcome-driven governance, if you recall, it's about effective and ethical leadership to achieve governance outcome from King Court's perspective. Now, I would like to relate this to business context to see bigger picture. Even in internal audit, are we seeing the bigger picture? Now, see this interesting thought. Don't miss the forest for the tree. Start with the bigger picture. So what is the bigger picture in business? So every business has to make money. You can take the analogy of a machine. Every machine is designed in a certain way, and there is a thing behind the design. Now see some companies, the way they make money, if you want to be profitable, there are a lot of shortcuts. You can pay lower salaries, violate regulations, make money, but is it sustainable, right? So in the business model has to be guided by a strategic mission, right? So now, for example, if you take Amazon, they say the mission is, strategic mission is to offer the lowest price, best available selection at utmost convenience. Now, I am just asking whether any company, not Amazon, if they have a mission like this, if you are a governance professional, have you really thought about the existing culture supports the convenience? If companies, employees are, the way they behave results in, customers are embarrassed, or there are a lot of customer sensitive data has been leaked and a lot of issues, and the customers struggle. Now, if you really look at holistically, company, while they have some vision like this, may not be practice, right? It's very important to look at the bigger picture in terms of how companies' business model, the money-making model, how it is guided. Is there a strategic mission? And what are the strategic risks associated with it? Are we auditing those risks? So, to make it more clear from integrated thinking perspective, any business, right, has to convert input, right, through business processes to output, right, and that output is going to create outcome. So no amount of money can make product. Don't have brain people. If you don't have, environment where you have oxygen, right, or the roads, how can you work? So without these elements, value cannot be created. Similarly, the way company operate can see whether they are going to create value or destroy value. So some business model can destroy social capital, natural capital, and we may not be able to leave our future generation. They may not be able to live in this planet. The way they pollute the air, water, etc. Right? The natural components, right? And the way business model works, it harms the human, right? People, while they get salary, they are really frustrated in their life. They are not happy. So business model we need to look at holistically. Now, why I am putting this together, when we do our work, the risk we have to look at from strategy perspective, strategic risks, operationally, each of these areas, manufacturing, if you take the process we are looking, right? But in terms of outcome, for example, the reputational risk, other areas, how do we cover? Then risk management will really fail if there is no governance. The whole thing is driven by governance, culture, ethics, and values. And that is where internal audit can play a much bigger role to provide assurance, advice, and insight. So, moving on, these are fundamentals. I mean, assurance is the bedrock role of internal audit. But in my presentation, I'm going to touch a lot of advisory work in terms of risk management, right? Architecture in combined assurance, auditing, enabling others, board of directors to see what is intangible in the culture, risk relating to the culture, and what insights the internal auditor can give from risk management perspective, right? So now I'm drawing your attention in this regard to one of the global perspective insights given by IIA Global to see as internal audit how they have to elevate from just being process audit or transaction driven audit to to give a more strategic impact. Whatever I spoke so far, you can see how they have been captured. For example, as internal audit, whether we understand organization's strategic mission, objectives, no point of just understanding how do we see that these are very much interconnected, the way company works, the culture match with these things. And do we really understand the CEOs? I am happy that I'm addressing Indian chapter. So I'm so happy when I read the book written by Ram Charan, right, on Think Like a CEO, right? So it's very important that we understand when it comes to governance professionals, how a CEO thinks in terms of creating value and how are we supporting in that journey, right? And obviously to become a trusted partner, how to support the strategic mission, and then elevating risk management role of the internal auditor to provide risk assurance. Now, these areas I am going to touch. So why I am connecting this so far, whatever discussed from a bigger picture perspective is connecting these big ticket items like risk management, strategic risk, right? How do we create value together with the business leaders, right? So what strategies are available for internal audit? One is to learn to think like a CEO, right? But you should act as a CA. You can think as a CEO, but we know as independent professional, we need to act as the chief audit executive or even if you're a CFO. I mean, you need to maintain that. And how do you break silos? I'm going to talk about combined assurance, more practical approach. I mean, how do we really implement that? And then the connectivity between enterprise risk management and auditing, and finally to talk about auditing culture. So I hello.
Indunil, we seem to have lost you briefly. You may want to get started with the slide preceding to this, please, if you don't mind.
Yeah, because there is the power cut. Fortunately, I had a backup. Are you able to see my screen now?
Yeah, that's right, Indunil. We are able to see it, and if I can request you to go to the prior slide, that's where I think we seem to have lost you, but over to you.
Yeah, now you can see the slide on the planning, right?
Correct, standard 2010.
Yeah. Right. So I want to say, where do we start connecting our work to strategy? So again, to show you in terms of planning the work of internal audit. So the audit planning standard draw particular attention. What is really planning? Whether we connect our work, risk-based audit plan is whether we are really aligning our work to organizational strategies, objectives and risks and the risk management process. So which means any work, now this is whatever work internal auditors do, how it is connecting to risk management process. That's very important. That's why this slide is termed as how do we move to a mature audit cycle. If you look at different maturity levels of internal audit, traditionally it has been control-based auditing, right? From control-based to process, and many people say risk-based auditing. And now the thinking is if you can connect or start your internal audit plan based on an enterprise-wide risk management process, definitely you're going to see a bigger picture, because by definition, ERM has to cover, take a portfolio view and cover risk across the organization, right? So where do you start? Now, the question that I am posing to you in many organizations, right? You will see, except banks, from regulatory perspective, there is a clear demarcation between risk management and internal auditing. But most other companies, they might say that, look here, have internal auditors, we don't have risk. Internal auditors take care of risk as well. So in that sense, right now I'm drawing your attention to the planning part where internal audit says start your work by looking at the risk. Now, if company doesn't have any risk management process, from where you should start, that is where you have to look at where your organization stands. I am just showing to you a risk maturity model to understand where your company is. You might say we are risk naive, no risk management. Oh, our people, the board of directors, they are aware. Some people do, some they don't do. Oh, are you able to say that our company has a risk management process which is defined? Oh, we are managed or mature. So if you are in above stage 3, the internal auditor first should take a look at what are the strategic risks, what are the other big risk items, and whether those risks are covered to give that risk assurance to the board of directors. And then, so far I spoke about integrated governance, how to look at the bigger picture. And of course, in the interest of, I mean, with the time constraint, I don't cover all of these areas, but internal audit is equipped to give that integrated audit perspective as well to when it comes to audit, not just to look at, let us say it's a procurement audit. You don't just audit procurement. You're auditing as a part of procurement the connected ethical issues, connected IT security issues, all of that operational issues, etc., legal issues and fraud. So connecting all of this and giving that holistic assurance, right, through the audit. So uh, so far, you know, I have also mentioned to you the power of integrated thinking more than integrated reporting, looking a business from the lens of multiple capital approach, the 6 capitals. So IIA has already covered these areas, the role internal auditors have to play in these sections. Now, before I was planning today's session, I want to see whether the topics that I speak are relevant. So you can see this is a famous publication by IIA every year. What are the top risk items around the world by interviewing through some research with senior personnel across different countries, including board members, chief audit executives, to take a look at what is relevant for 2022 and beyond. Out of the many items, these are new items, and I'm happy that most of the topics I'm touching today have come to this list. One is to look at organizational governance. If there is a problem in organizational governance, right? Okay, there is a governance, but that governance in the business objective. And then culture, where the organization has a process of monitoring, right, and managing culture related issues. Is there a desired behavior in the company? I will show you some practical example in my last segment. And like I already said, through the organizational activities, how society is going to be impacted. It may be through the product quality, the poor quality items, it's detrimental to human health, or the environmental pollution, right? So environment has been captured again as a separate item. Right now, these are going to be hot topics as we move on according to global perspective in IIA 2020 on risk map, right? So that is why I want to talk about this segment, organizational governance, right? How do we audit that, right? And how do we audit culture? And then this combined assurance to give that holistic picture, holistic assurance. So when it comes to governance auditing, right, you can see the role of internal auditors. One, do you really, now when we say governance, I hope you remember, if not, I will again recap that definition. Processes and structures, right, implemented by board to direct, right, manage in relation to achieved objectives. So what are such board related processes and structures? Now see these topics, big items. Ethics and values, they are on at the top matters a lot. If they don't practice ethics and values, how can rest of the organization follow? Performance management angle, right? How do we communicate risk information? That is a governance topic again. How do we coordinate across multiple service providers, assurance providers, like compliance professionals, forensic auditors, various other people, external auditors, the coordination, and that is where combination also comes, right? So this is about governance audit, the areas to cover. And theoretically, I don't want to cover all of this, but I want to give some examples through my case study segment of the session. And now, if you really look at the previous slide had these topics, ethics and value, what internal auditor can do? Can you do something, assurance on ethics and value? How do we do? That broadly comes under culture audit piece. I will cover that briefly. In relation to performance management, how do we check the governance of that? Of course, you can check the accuracy of the KPI, but whether organization has a proper governance processes for performance management, you might say that some of the KPIs set are detrimental. KPIs create a risk and dysfunctional behavior in the organization, right? Those risks and KPI drive excessive risk-taking behavior and fraudulent behavior. Now, those segments in one of the audit you can highlight as a governance issue, right? So you can, rather than auditing the accuracy of a KPI, you may want to see the dysfunctional behavior arising from this KPI. There is no congruence across your goals and the KPIs, they are disconnected, right? So like that, you can challenge performance management and then communicating risk information. Like I said, these last two pieces about how do we communicate risk and how do we coordinate with other parties like compliance, external audit, and various other people, health and safety professionals, for example. Now, these two I'm covering under combined assurance culture. So those areas are covered in you see the standard, but I will cover through those topics these areas. So when it comes to auditing governance, after this slide probably can go to little details of how do we do. Now, if you want to audit governance so far that we discussed, you can have a little bite strategy rather than doing a detailed governance audit. Like I said, every audit, you can have a segment to say that this is governance, right? And talk about governance. Like I said, in the procurement audit, you might say the way KPIs have been set, the ethical dimensions of the way the people are working, right? And then you might say that company has several connection with outsourced organization and various external parties. The way their performance is being monitored can probably be captured under governance, right? So that is a little bite strategy. In a normal audit, you can talk about a segment called governance. The other one is auditing culture as a separate exercise you can discuss. So I'm covering that separately. So the little bite approach is useful because if you haven't done any governance audit, when you do a normal audit, have an area called governance. You can go through the, I mean, if you are new, I'm sure some of you have already done these things. right? But if you are new to these areas, I really recommend you to look at it. First, read the standard, understand what it is. Then, I mean, with the knowledge, you have to be open mind to see that one size doesn't fit. The way it is applied depends on the organization, right? And then uh, Sunil, uh, Sunil,
Yeah,
are you there?
yeah, Indunil. Go ahead, Indunil. Looks like Indunil had some power issues. Let us just give a couple of minutes, please. In the meanwhile, participants, if you want to drop in your questions, and the moment Indunil joins back, we'll route those questions after the session is over. Appreciate your cooperation. Thank you so much.
Hi, Sunil.
Hi, Charit. Yeah.
Sunil, I think unfortunately there was a power disruption, which I think is happening across Sri Lanka these days. So with that, unfortunately, I think he's unable to join. I think we have two options, whether we can wait for about 5 minutes just to see whether it will kickstart. Whether that was that possible, Sunil?
Yeah, sure. We'll just give 5 minutes. And participants, thank you so much for your patience. Let's allow Indunil 5 minutes to log on back. Thank you, Charit.
Thank you.
Charit, looks like Indunil has continued issues. If I could request the audience, a fine session, but an unfortunate incident, and we will try and see if we can cover the balance of the session with a new topic hosted from Vizag Audit Club and Hyderabad. With that said, I think, Charit, if you may permit, we could possibly close the session for now. Appreciate the audience patience, but it was really unfortunate.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it was out of many people's hands, and I think it's a issue faced across the country in Sri Lanka. So I think we were heading steam to quite an interesting area and the case studies as well. So having said that, as taking up your suggestion, Sunil, maybe we can club it with another session and make it a little bit more exposed that way as well, covering the rest of it and maybe recapping a little bit on what was discussed today. And accordingly, I think we can conclude the session, Sunil.
Wonderful. Thank you, Charit. All the audience, thank you. Stay safe, and we will convene again. And apologies for this disruption. Thank you. Menas, you may want to close it, and then we may want to possibly have this combined with the next session, as Charit had mentioned.
Sure, sir. Surely, sir. Thank you.